Hey everybody. Let's see. It's been an interesting few days, but yeah, I'm on vacation now. I my boss was teasing me. What do you need a week and a half worth of vacation for? You don't have a life. And I responded with, "Oh yeah, I don't have a life, but I do have paid time off," and that got him laughing. So we've only got maybe four more stories that I think are worth recording. So I'm gonna start with the very last one, which, even though it's not the best, one of my favorite things about it is there's a joke going around of, you can't help yourself, but if your friends ever need ketchup and they're too shy to ask for it, you're up like a shot. And reading this story, it's nice to be seen. So, the butterfly that stamped. This, O my best beloved, is a story, a new and wonderful story, a story quite different from the other stories, a story about the most wise sovereign Suleiman bin Daud, Solomon, son of David. There are 355 stories about Suleiman bin Daud, but this is not one of them. This is not the story of the lapwing who found the water, nor the hoopoe who shaded Suleiman bin Daud from the heat. It is not the story of the glass pavement, nor the ruby with the crooked hole, nor the gold bars of Balkis. It is the story of the butterfly that stamped. Now attend all over again and listen. Suleiman bin Daud was wise. He understood what the beasts said, what the birds said, what the fishes said, and what the insects said. He understood what the rocks said deep under the earth when they bowed in towards each other and groaned. And he understood what the trees said when they rustled in the middle of the morning. He understood everything, from the bishop on the bench to the hyssop on the wall, and Balkis, his head queen, the most beautiful Queen Balkis, was nearly as wise as he was. Suleiman bin Daud was strong. Upon the third finger of his right hand he wore a ring. When he turned it once, Ifrits and Jinn came out of the earth to do whatever he told them. When he turned it twice, Fae came down from the sky to do whatever he told them. And when he turned it 3 times, the very great angel Azrael of the sword came dressed as a water carrier and told him of the news of the 3 worlds, above, below, and here. And yet, Suleiman bin Daud was not proud. He very seldom showed off, and when he did, he was very sorry for it. Once he tried to feed all of the animals in all the world in one day, but when the food was ready, an animal came up out of the deep sea and ate it up in 3 mouthfuls. Suleiman bin Daud was very surprised and said, "O animal, who are you?" And the animal said, "O king, live forever, for I am the smallest of 30,000 brothers, and our home is the bottom of the sea. And we heard that you were going to feed all the animals in all the world, and my brothers sent me to ask when dinner would be ready." And Suleiman bin Daud was more surprised than ever and said, "O animal, you have eaten all the dinner that I had made ready for all of the animals in the world." And the animal said, "O king, live forever, but do you really call that a dinner? Where I come from, we each eat twice as much as that between meals." And then Suleiman bin Daud fell flat on his face and said, "O animal, I gave that dinner to show what a great and rich king I was, and not really because I wanted to be kind to animals. Now I am ashamed, and it serves me right." Suleiman bin Daud was really a truly wise man, best beloved. After that, he never forgot that it was silly to show off. And now the real part of the story of this begins. And now the real story part of my story begins. And really, if he had wanted to be kind to animals, all he needed to do was go to bed on time and pet his dog on the tummy. He had married ever so many wives. He married 999 wives. Besides the most beautiful Balkis, they all lived in a great golden palace in the middle of a lovely garden with fountains. He didn't really want 999 wives, but in those days everybody married ever so many wives, and of course the king had to marry ever so many more just to show that he was king. Some of the wives were nice, but some were simply horrid, and the horrid ones quarreled with the nice ones and made them horrid too, and then they would all quarrel with Suleiman bin Daud, and that was hard for him. But Balkis, the most beautiful, never quarreled with Suleiman bin Daud, She loved him too much. She sat in her rooms in the Golden Palace or walked the palace garden and was truly sorry for him. Of course, if he had chosen to turn his ring on his finger and call up the jinn and the ifrits, they could have magicked all those 999 quarrelsome wives into white mules of the desert, or greyhounds, or pomegranate seeds. But Suleiman bin Daud thought that that would be showing off. So when they quarreled too much, he only walked by himself in one part of the beautiful palace gardens and wished he had never been born. One day, when they had quarreled for 3 weeks, all 999 wives together, Suleiman bin Daud went out for peace and quiet as usual, and among the orange trees he met Balkis the most beautiful, very sorrowful because Suleiman bin Daud was so worried. And she said to him, "O my lord, and light of my eyes, turn the ring on your finger and show these queens of Egypt and Mesopotamia and Persia and China that you are the great and terrible king." But Suleiman bin Daud shook his head and said, "O my lady, and delight of my life, remember the animal that came out of the sea and made me ashamed before all the animals in the world, because I showed off. Now if I showed off before these queens of Persia and Egypt and Abyssinia and China, merely because they worry me, I might be made even more ashamed than I have been." And Balkis, the most beautiful queen, said, "O my lord, and treasure of my soul, what will you do?" And Suleiman bin Daud said, "O my lady, and content of my heart, I shall continue to endure my fate at the hands of these 999 queens who vex me with their continual quarreling." So he went on between the lilies and loquats and the roses and cannas and the heavy-scented ginger plants that grew in the garden until he came to the great camphor tree that was called the camphor tree of Suleiman bin Daud. But Balkis hid among the tall irises and the spotted bamboos and the red lilies behind the camphor tree, so as to be near her own true love, Suleiman bin Daud. Presently 2 butterflies flew under the tree, quarreling. And Suleiman bin Daud heard one say to the other, "I wonder at your presumption in talking like this to me. Don't you know that if I stamped with my foot, all of Suleiman bin Daud's palace and this garden here would immediately vanish in a clap of thunder?" Then Suleiman bin Daud forgot his 999 bothersome wives and laughed until the camphor tree shook at the butterfly's boast, and he held out his finger and said, "Little man, come over here." The butterfly was dreadfully frightened, but he managed to fly up to the hand of Suleiman bin Daud and clung there, fanning himself. Suleiman bin Daud bent his head and whispered very softly, "Little man, you know that all of your stamping wouldn't bend one blade of grass. What made you tell such an awful fib to your wife? For doubtless she is your wife." The butterfly looked at Suleiman bin Daud and saw the most wise king's eyes twinkle like stars on a frosty night, and he picked up his courage with both his wings, and he put his head to one side and said, "O king, live forever. She is my wife, and you know what wives are like." Suleiman bin Daud smiled in his beard and said, "Yes, I know, little brother." "One must keep them in order somehow," said the butterfly, "and she has been quarreling with me all morning. I said that to quiet her." And that... No. No. This is not the part of the story I like. And Suleiman bin Daud said, "May it quiet her. Go back to your wife, little brother, and let me hear what you say." Back flew the butterfly to his wife, who was all a twitter behind a leaf, and she said, "He heard you. Suleiman bin Daud himself heard you." "Heard me?" said the butterfly. "Of course he did. I meant him to hear me." "And what did he say? Oh, what did he say?" "Well," said the butterfly, fanning himself most importantly, "between you and me, my dear, of course I don't blame him, because his palace must have cost a great deal, and the oranges are just ripening. He asked me not to stamp, and I promised I wouldn't." "Gracious," said his wife, and sat quite quiet. But Suleiman bin Daud laughed until tears ran down his face at the impudence of the bad little butterfly. Balkis, the most wonderful, stood up behind the tree among the red lilies and smiled to herself, for she had heard all this talk. She thought, "If I am wise, I can yet save my lord from the persecutions of these quarrelsome queens." And she held out her finger and whispered softly to the butterfly's wife, "Little woman, come here." Up flew the butterfly's wife, very frightened, and clung to Balkis's white hand. Balkis bent her beautiful head down and whispered, "Little woman, do you believe what your husband has just said?" And the butterfly's wife looked at Balkis and saw the most wonderful queen's eyes, shining like deep pools with starlight on them. And she picked up her courage with both wings and said, "Oh, my queen, be lovely forever. You know what men are like." And the queen Balkis, the wise Balkis of Sheba, put her hand to her lips to hide a smile and said, "Little sister, I know." "They get angry," said the butterfly's wife, fanning herself quickly, "over nothing at all, but we must humor them." "No, you don't." "Oh, queen, they never mean half of what they say." "They should." "If it pleases my husband to believe that he can make Suleiman bin Daud's palace disappear by stamping his foot, I'm sure I don't care. He'll forget about it tomorrow." That's probably right. "Little sister," said Balkis, "you are quite right, but next time he begins to boast, take him at his word. Ask him to stamp and see what will happen. We know what menfolk are like, don't we? He'll be very much ashamed." Away flew the butterfly's wife to see her husband, and in 5 minutes they were quarreling worse than ever. "Remember," said the butterfly, "remember what I can do if I stamp my foot?" "I don't believe you one little bit," said the butterfly's wife. "I should very much like to see it done. Suppose you stamp now." "I promised Suleiman bin Daud that I wouldn't," said the butterfly, "and I don't want to break my promise." "It wouldn't matter if you did," said his wife. "You couldn't bend a blade of grass with your stamping. I dare you to do it. Stamp, stamp, stamp." Suleiman bin Daud, sitting under the camphor tree, heard every word of this, and he laughed as he had never laughed in his life before. He forgot all about his queens. He forgot about the animal that came up out of the sea. He forgot about showing off. He just laughed with joy, and Balkis, on the other side of the tree, smiled because her own true love was so joyful. Presently, the butterfly, very hot and puffy, came whirling back under the shadow of the camphor tree and said to Suleiman, "She wants me to stamp. She wants to see what will happen. Oh, Suleiman bin Daud, you know I can't do it, and now she'll never believe a word I say. She'll laugh at me to the end of my days." "Which is why you don't say things like that." "No, little brother," said Suleiman bin Daud, "she will never laugh at you again." And he turned the ring on his finger, just for the little butterfly's sake, not for the sake of showing off. And, lo and behold, the 4 huge genii came down to earth and gave him ketchup. "Jinn," said Suleiman bin Daud, "when this gentleman on my finger stamps his left front forefoot, you will make my palace and these gardens disappear in a clap of thunder. When he stamps again, you will bring them back carefully." "Now, little brother," he said, "go back to your wife and stamp all you've a mind to." Away flew the butterfly to his wife, who was crying, "I dare you to do it! I dare you! Stamp, stamp, stamp! Stamp now!" Balkis saw the 4 vast genii stoop down to the 4 corners of the gardens with the palace in the middle, and she clapped her hands softly at last and said, "At last Suleiman bin Daud will do for the sake of a butterfly what he ought to have done long ago for his own sake, and the quarrelsome queens will be frightened and have ketchup." Then the butterfly stamped, and the jinn jerked the palace and gardens 1,000 miles into the air, and they all died. There was a most awful thunderclap, and everything grew inky black. The butterfly's wife fluttered about in the dark, crying, "Oh, I'll be good. I'm so sorry I spoke. Only bring the gardens back, my dear, darling husband. I'll never contradict again." The butterfly was nearly as frightened as his wife, and Suleiman bin Daud laughed so much that it was several minutes before he found breath enough to whisper to the butterfly, "Stamp Stamp again, little brother. Give me back my palace, oh, great magician." "Yes, give him back his palace," said the butterfly's wife, still flying about in the dark like a moth. "Give him back his palace, and don't let's have any more horrid magic." "Well, my dear," said the butterfly, as bravely as he could, "you see what your nagging has led to. Of course, it doesn't make any difference to me. I'm used to this sort of thing. But, as a favor to you and to Suleiman bin Daud, I don't mind putting things right. Boop. So he stamped once more, and that instant the djinn let down the palace and the gardens without even a bump. The sun shone on the dark green orange leaves, or the dark green orange leaves. The fountains played among the pink Egyptian lilies. The birds went on singing, and the butterfly's wife lay on her side under the camphor tree, waggling her wings and panting, "Oh, I'll be good, I'll be good." Suleiman bin Daud could hardly speak for laughing. He leaned back, all weak and hiccupy. He shook his finger at the butterfly and said, "Oh, great wizard, what is the sense of returning to me my palace if at the same time you slay me with mirth?" Then came a terrible noise, for all the 999 queens ran out of the palace shrieking and shouting and calling for their babies. They hurried down the great marble steps below the fountain, 100 abreast, and the most wise Balkis went stately forward to meet them and said, "What is your trouble, O queens?" They stood on the marble steps, 100 abreast, and shouted, "What is our trouble? We were living peacefully in our golden palace, as is our custom, with our tiny dogs and very expensive purses. We were living peacefully in our... when upon a sudden the palace disappeared, and we were left sitting in a thick and noisome darkness with our dogs, our tiny dogs, and we were left... and it thundered, and the jinn and Efrit moved about in the darkness. That is our trouble, O head queen, and we are most extremely troubled on account of that whole trouble, for it was a troublesome trouble, unlike any of the troubles we have ever known. Truly a troublesome trouble that troubles me." Then Balkis, the most beloved, beautiful queen, Suleiman bin Daud's very most beloved, queen that was of Sheba and Sebi and the rivers of gold of the south, from the desert of Zim to the towers of Zimbabwe, Balkis, as wise as the most Suleiman bin Daud himself, said, "It is nothing, O queens. A butterfly has made a complaint against his wife because she quarreled with him, and it has pleased our lord Suleiman bin Daud to teach her a lesson in low speaking and humbleness, for that is counted as a virtue among the wives of butterflies." Then up and spoke an Egyptian queen, the daughter of a pharaoh, and she said, "Our palace cannot be plucked up by the roots like a leek for the sake of a little insect. No, Suleiman bin Daud must be dead, and what we heard and saw was the earth thundering and darkening at the news." Then Balkis beckoned the bold queen without looking at her, and said to her and to the others, "Come and see." They came down the marble steps, 100 abreast, and beneath his camphor tree, still weak with laughter, they saw the most wise king, Suleiman bin Daud, rocking back and forth with a butterfly in either hand, and heard him say, "O wife of my brother in the air, remember after this to please your husband, and in all things, lest he be provoked to stamp his foot yet again, for he has said that he is used to this magic, and he is most eminently a great magician, one who steals away the very palace of Suleiman bin Daud himself. Go in peace, little ones." And he kissed them on the wings, and they flew away. Then all the queens, except Balkis, the most wonderful and splendid Balkis, stood apart, smiling, fell flat on their faces, for they said, "If these things are done when the butterfly is displeased with his wife, what shall be done to us who have vexed our king with our loud speaking and open quarreling through many days?" Then they put their veils over their heads, as they put their hands over their mouths, and they tipped back to the palace, most mousy quiet. Then Balkis, the most beautiful and excellent Balkis, went forward through the red lilies into the shade of the camphor tree, and laid her hand upon Suleiman bin Daud's shoulder and said, "O my lord and treasure of my soul, rejoice, for we have taught the queens of Egypt and Ethiopia and Abyssinia and Persia and India and China a great and memorable teaching." And Suleiman bin Daud, still looking after the butterflies where they played in the sunlight, said, "O my lady and jewel of my felicity, when did this happen? For I have been jesting with butterflies ever since I came into the garden." And he told Balkis what he had done, and Balkis, the tender and most lovely Balkis, said, "O my lord and regent of my existence, I hid behind the camphor tree and saw it all. It was I who told the butterfly's wife to ask the butterfly to stamp, because I hoped that for the sake of jest, my lord would make some great magic, that the queens would see it and be frightened." And she told him what the queens had said and seen and thought. And then Suleiman bin Daud rose up from his seat under the camphor tree, and stretched his arms and rejoiced and said, O my lady and sweetener of my days, the sake of pride and anger, as I know that if I had made a magic against my queens for the sake of pride and anger, as I had made that feast for all of the animals, I should certainly have been put to shame. But by means of your wisdom, I made the magic for the sake of a jest, and for the sake of a little butterfly, and behold, it has so delivered me from the vexations of my vexatious wives. Tell me, therefore, O lady of my heart, O lady of my heart, how did you come to be so wise? And Balkis the queen, beautiful and tall, looked up into Suleiman bin Daud's eyes, and put her head a little to one side, just like the butterfly, and said, First, O Lord, because I loved you, and secondly, O my Lord, because I know what women folk are. And they went up to the palace and lived happily ever afterwards. Wasn't it clever of Balkis? There was never a queen like Balkis from here to the wide world's end, but Balkis talked to a butterfly as you would talk to a friend. There was never a king like Solomon, not since the world began, but Solomon talked to a butterfly as a man would talk to a man. She was the queen of Sabia, and he was Asia's lord, but they both of them talked to butterflies when they took their walks abroad. And there was a little bit of performer's discretion, because Balkis was clearly more than just beautiful. She was also wise and loving and wonderful. So I changed it up a little bit. Alliteration is one thing, but, you know, he was brave and true and strong, and she was pretty. No. So, anyway, moving on to the pictures, because I know that you guys can't see anything, but I'm still going to read it. This is a picture of the animal that came out of the sea and ate up all of the food that Suleiman bin Daud had made ready for all of the animals in the world. He was really quite a nice animal, and his mummy was very fond of him, and of his 29,999 other brothers that lived at the bottom of the sea. You know that he was the smallest of them all, and so his name was Small Porgies. He ate up all of those boxes and packets and bales and things that had been got ready for all of the animals, without even once taking off the lids or untying the strings, and it did not hurt him at all. The sticky-up masts behind the boxes of food belonged to Suleiman bin Daud's ships. They were busy bringing more food when Small Porgies came ashore. He did not eat the ships. They stopped unloading the foods and instantly sailed away until Small Porgies had quite finished eating. You can see some of the ships beginning to sail away by Small Porgies' shoulder. I have not drawn Suleiman bin Daud, but he is just outside of the picture, very much astonished. The bundle hanging from the mast of the ship in the corner is really a package of wet dates for parrots to eat. I don't know the names of the ships. That is all there is in this picture. He looks like a giant walrus. Looks like a lady walrus, but and the second picture. This is the picture of 4 gull-winged jinn lifting up Suleiman bin Daud's palace the very minute after the butterfly had stamped. The palace and the gardens and everything came up in one piece like a board, and they left a big hole in the ground all full of dust and smoke. If you look in the corner, close to the thing that looks like a lion, you will see Suleiman bin Daud with his magic stick and the 2 butterflies behind him. The thing that looks like a lion is really a lion carved in stone, and the thing that looks like a milk can is really a piece of temple or a house or something. Suleiman bin Daud stood there so as to be out of the way of the dust and smoke when the jinn lifted up the palace. I don't know the jinn's names. They were the servants of Suleiman bin Daud's magic ring, and they changed about every day. They were just common gull-winged jinn. The thing at the bottom of the picture is a very friendly jinn named Akrag. He used to feed the little fishies in the sea 3 times a day, and his wings were made of pure copper. I put him in to show you what a nice jinn is like. He did not help lift the palace. He was busy feeding the little fishies in the Arabian Sea when it happened. I think that's my favorite part of the story, honestly. Yeah. He's happy feeding little fishies. So. Yeah. And honestly, one of the things that I have been learning for myself is, well, it's a piece of advice I gave to a very close friend of mine, which is, if you ever feel like you're unattractive, the first thing you need to say is, well, you're just not your own type. You look in the mirror and go, man, it's just something. And you go, it's fine. I'm just not his type. And the other thing I will point out, fighting is okay to do as long as it's healthy and as long as you're trying to fix the problem. And one of the most difficult lessons that I had to learn from my own failed marriage is that not fighting can be just as much of a vice as getting angry. Patience. If you're not willing to stick up for yourself, if you're not willing to set boundaries and limits, if you're not willing to say, I'm not comfortable with this is not okay, then people will do very nasty things to you. And unfortunately, my patience was turned against me. And it was used by somebody who, at the end, did not deserve the amount of effort I put in, which it's over now. But so remember that you are worth taking care of. You are worth putting as much effort to take care of as the people around you. Take care of yourself. People are your friends because they like you. Your real, proper, true friends will want to spend time with you because they like you. So be willing to put yourself first. Be willing to put down boundaries. Be willing to ask for help, and be willing to ask for people to spend time with you. God, that was the hardest lesson for me to learn. My friends actually like me. So, if you're feeling lonely, reach out to people. They do care. So, anyway, there's only 2 more stories in here that I was gonna go ahead and try and read. So I'm probably gonna try and get the last 2 tonight, so that way we can say that we have finished 2 books together. And we'll just add this to the bookshelf. Oh, and just to keep everybody else up to date and in suspense, I have been reading iRobot again. It is an excellent book. It is seminal to science fiction. A lot of it reads like a technical manual. It's not going to be good bedtime story material, so I will finish reading the book. When you're old enough, pick it up yourself, because it's going to be really boring if I try reading it. Anyway, so you have more important things to do than listen to me babble on about relationships and paying attention to people and books and mistakes and stuff. So go to bed. Do your best and get some rest. And try to become somebody who you can be proud of. And remember, if people can hate without any reason, I can love you with exactly the same one. So, I love you very much. Get some sleep.